CSU Inspire. My name is, I like all this clapping. I'm loving it. My name is Raya Vigil, and I'm the Director of Diversity Education and Training through the Office of the Vice President for Diversity. I have the honor today of being your host as we hear of the many inspiring programs, ideas, and initiatives happening in relation to diversity and equity and inclusion at CSU. This is our fourth CSU Inspire. Our first session featured 4 people and had about 50 people in attendance. Today, we have 6 presenters and over 170 people in attendance, which is amazing. This event has grown over the last few years and it's become one of the highlights of the Diversity Symposium, and it's my particular favorite, not just because I get to hear myself talk, but because it's amazing. So the Diversity Symposium is just one of the many opportunities we provide for the campus to engage in critical discourse, develop multicultural competency, and build recognition of the complexity of access and personal identity. If you'd like to know more about the current initiatives that we're working on or other professional development opportunities, come find me after this session. I wore my green pants today, so I was easy to spot, and I had a lot of CSU pride. So there you go. So today we are fortunate to have 6 presenters who have agreed to inspire us with their self-reflection, real-life experiences, and innovative research. Each presenter was asked to deliver this information in just 8 minutes. And as you can imagine, that this is no small feat to express large ideas in a relatively short time frame. Each presenter has welcomed the challenge, and we are excited to have them here today. Our first presenter is Tehani Holt. I had the opportunity to meet with Tehani last week. She is the undergrad that has graciously taken the challenge to come, and I have to say you're in for a treat. This woman is fire, and I'm excited to have her. So Tehani is a senior in the School of Social Work with a minor in ethnic studies and will graduate this fall. She is a proud Black feminist. She is engaged in many leadership roles and efforts to meet the needs of under-recognized and underprivileged identities on CSU's campus, including Black students, Black women, Muslims, international students, and DACA students. Considering the current political climate and the work she has done here at CSU, she is planning to continue her education in a dual degree program with a master's in public policy and a Juris Doctorate. That's not bad, right, folks? Homegrown here. So with that, I would like to welcome Tehani Holt to the stage.
Mike? Oh, there we go. Good. Hello, everybody. Whenever you're ready. In 1982, Michelle Rawless writes, "Despite a sizable number of Black feminists who have contributed to the leadership of the women's movement, there still is no Black women's movement, and it appears there won't be for some time to come. Perhaps a multicultural women's movement somewhere in the future, but for now, Black feminists of necessity, it seems, exist as individuals, some well-known, like Eleanor Holmes Norton, Florence Kennedy, Faith Ringgold, Shirley Chisholm, Alice Walker, and some unknown like me. We exist as women who are feminists, each stranded in the moment, working independently because there is not yet an environment in this society remotely congenial to our struggle. Because being on the bottom, we would have to do what no one else has done. We would have to fight the world." Here's a small list of Black women who have been murdered by police over the years. Yvette Smith, 47. Rekia Boyd, 22. Katherine Johnson, 92. And Ayanna Stanley Jones, 7. I want you to notice the age range of these women. The beast of violence, this white supremacist patriarchal violence, has no boundaries. And Black women are born seemingly raised knowing that their lives have no value, a unique lack of value, separate from anyone else. Here's a list of Black women and other women of color, both cis and trans, who have violently lost their lives, mostly to civilians, with the exception of LaVena Johnson, 19, who was brutally beaten and murdered and raped serving the US military in 2005. She had been serving since 2003. Her death is still categorized as a suicide. despite obvious evidence that points otherwise. A very cruel and sad example of the value placed on Black women and Black women's bodies. Both Black women, girls, cis, and trans. I want you to notice again the age range of those women. Black girls and women make up about 7% of the US population, but over 35% of missing persons cases. Latina and Black women and girls are disappearing by the dozens. And estimates predict that over 75,000 Black women are missing in the US alone. Black women and other women of color all over the globe are disappearing. Yet, Black women and girls and other women of color have organized to demand answers, to search, to mourn, and to organize. They have done this primarily with themselves and with each other. The mainstream media isn't yet interested. So we make our own spaces to mourn, to organize, and to teach. And this typically begins in our kitchens. The conference that I'll tell you about in a second began in our kitchen. Black women organizing together, talking about the threat under the current political climate. Organizing in ways to try to bring Black women tools for survival, tools for success, and bring other people into a movement that is truly intersectional. So you'll see in the cyber realm, #SayHerName. It's a space where Black women created for themselves to bring Black women to the forefront of police brutality, to talk about the racism and sexism that we experience simultaneously. And so you'll see these pictures all over the internet. And that happened on a national level. It's an example of how Black women are organizing across different kinds of boundaries, class lines, race lines, age, sexuality, gender. And you'll find a similar thing happening here at CSU. Black women organizing to create their own spaces. A couple of years ago, following the death of Sandra Bland, Black women desperately needed a space to unpack the things that were happening in society. And so we, as students, decided to create that space for ourselves. And what we did was invite Black women all over campus to come and talk about their experiences at a PWI. And what we heard was heartbreaking. Women expressed dissonance, they expressed feeling silenced, feeling alone, feeling like they didn't belong, all of these kinds of things together, both faculty, staff, and students. And so we took a hold of our education and resources. Many of us at this time were already studying Black feminism and other racialized feminisms. So we were bringing what we were learning to the forefront, what we were coming to understand about our lives, about ourselves, and about the society that we exist in. And so you'll find Black women all over campus taking these kinds of courses to better grasp what they need to survive on a predominantly white campus. And in those classes, we discovered women who have changed our lives. Women like Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, Paula Gunn Allen, Michelle Wallace, who I read to you earlier, all of these kind of women coming to explain what it meant to be both Black and woman, to be any of these identities and exist in this society. One of the things that was written by these women was, above all else, our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that Black women are inherently valuable. We are inherently valuable, that our liberation is necessary. And this is what Black women were finding and experiencing for themselves. And so they organized together to attend a conference about this very book. And so I came across this conference and I realized that the women who wrote these texts would be here, giving workshops, teaching, talking, and organizing under this current political climate to better assist Black women. And I told one of my professors, and immediately she gave us $500 to get a hotel room in Atlanta, Georgia, at Spelman College to attend this conference. About 2.5 weeks later, we had raised over $6,000 to take 13 women to Atlanta, Georgia to attend this conference to pursue their education. And these are some of our donors. You can clap for that if you'd like. And so we saw an opportunity to expand our knowledge. And for the first time, our professors were supporting an opportunity to expand our knowledge. For the first time, we felt that CSU was invested in our education, that they're invested in our success, and that they're invested in our mental health. Because at CSU, we don't have Black feminist spaces. We hardly have Black feminist professors. And so it's important for us as Black feminists to learn from the women who are changing our lives through text. And to sit at their feet and learn from them was an experience that we may have never had. And so part of our negotiation for this trip was to write a manifesto. And so immediately after returning from this trip, we would meet every week and we began writing. We wrote about our experiences at CSU, we wrote about our experiences in Colorado in general, and we began to unpack the things that make our lives unique as Black women, who are also students. So we talked about growing up in a post-racial era. We talked about growing up post 9/11. We talked about all of the kinds of things that situate us very uniquely as millennials. We cast out an audience, so we're talking to white feminists, we're talking to faculty, we're talking to staff, both who deal with Black students and who don't. We address Black spaces and white spaces on campus that are not congenial to our struggle and are not committed to our liberation. And so we're Black women organizing for change. So what I want to leave you with is that Black women on this campus are organizing, and Black women are carving out their own spaces regardless of what's been carved out for them. So I'll leave you with this quote. Black women both shape the world and are shaped by it. They create our feminist theory. They come to feminist theory and practice out of oppression they experience as people who are poor and Black and woman. If you want to learn a little bit more about my manifesto, I have another session on Thursday, and we'll be revealing a little bit more about that book. But what I really would like to leave you with is that Black women are highly capable of changing the world. Thank you.
I told you, right? I had this thought as I was sitting there, as we work with students and we wonder about the product of everything that we invest in students. I think if students come out just a little bit like Tehani, motivated, committed to social justice, then we're doing okay. We are doing okay, and that was amazing. I was going to plug her session that's happening later in the week. Thank you, Tehani, you already did, so please come. You will actually have copies of the Feminist Manifesto that you created, right? Not yet, but we can read excerpts of it. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Tehani. Okay, so next we have Alexis Conda Olmstead. Woo, I know, she's great. Alexis Conda Olmstead is the Managing Director for Talent Management and Training and Support at Colorado State University. In this role, she leads diversity and inclusion efforts, manages career and professional development initiatives, and delivers learning programs for 150 staff in the Division of University Advancement. Prior to talent management, Alexis directed leadership development programs and taught leadership classes at CSU. Alexis's work has been recognized at the university and national levels, most recently by the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. Alexis is a women's development blogger and the founder of the AKO Collective, a women's leadership initiative based in Northern Colorado. Help me welcome Alexis Conda Olmstead.
Thanks, girl. Before we get started, I want to make sure you can hear me. And I also want to say these slides advance on their own every 40 seconds. And so for Tehani and for our speakers, just recognizing that this is kind of a heavy lift and it's even more awesome than it seems. So, all right, I think I'm ready to go. Hit it. Yes. That is the answer that you need to 5 questions I'll share with you before you embark on a diversity and inclusion initiative. Maybe won't cut it, and no is no, but with yes, you have a chance. Ironically, my answer, at least in my head, when Vice President at the time, Brett Anderson, asked me to lead the Diversity Inclusion Initiative was no. It was more like a heck no. Because diversity inclusion is hard work, and I know it is. And I think that most of us do. That's why we're here, because we're engaged in it and we're figuring it out. These are my parents, Dick and Diane. They were married in 1967, which is the year the Supreme Court finally struck down the laws that banned interracial marriages. They were the product of their times. My mother was disowned by her family for marrying my father, and my father is the son of Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II. He was born 1 year after they got out of the camps. In this photo, they're in their early 20s, which is the age of most of the college students walking our campus today. So to me personally, and to a certain extent professionally, diversity and inclusion is a little personal. It's a little sensitive. But how can we say anything but yes when we want to move forward and try to create positive change? And how could I say no to the work that needed to be done, the work that my parents stood for? And last but not least, how could I say no to Brett Anderson, a white man with every privilege in the privilege playbook who has his own personal story that makes him want everyone in his division to feel valued and affirmed? Brett believed in me, and that brings me to the first official question, which is, does your leadership support you? Because it's really easy to support diversity and inclusion until it isn't. Until you start getting blowback from your staff, until you receive anonymous letters sent to your office in the admin building, until rebranding the office or the division Christmas potluck a holiday potluck brings out accusations that this is the beginning of the apocalypse, until someone mentions EO lawsuit for reverse discrimination. All of these things happen, and that's when support becomes a verb. When it's more than lip service, when you don't get your projects derailed and you're not chastised or silenced. And that's why we have the incredible results that we've had with our initiative. Our campus climate survey results pre and post this initiative have gone up tremendously, 30% better employee environment since we've done this work. And there are a lot of other tangible things that we've done to get there that I'd be happy to share with you after the session. We've rewritten our professional competencies with diversity and inclusion language. We required it on all of our job descriptions. There's questions that we ask of our candidates. We evaluate based on diversity and inclusion behaviors. Which leads me to the next question. What is your case for support? The moral and ethical case is there. And unfortunately, it's not always enough, even though it should be. Our case for support is that we are responsible for raising almost $200 million a year and engaging every alumni and community member who loves this university. And the only way we can do that is if we commit to diversity and inclusion. So how does diversity and inclusion serve your organization? What is the business case? Are you wanting to be more innovative and creative? Diversity will give you that. Are you wanting to attract and recruit and retain talented students? Inclusion is critical to that. Are you trying to graduate students who are going to be prepared for a global workforce to succeed? Diversity gives you that. Figure out what the mission of your organization and how diversity and inclusion serves it. I guarantee you it's there. The next question is, how do you generate buy-in with privileged groups? I have privileged identities, as many, probably more than my marginalized identities. I don't know very many people, privileged, marginalized identities, who look forward to going to a diversity training, except maybe the facilitators and the people who are responsible for it. It's hard work, and I know that I'm talking to people who love this, so I get it. And very few of us go skipping off to diversity training. So what I would say is the antidote to the fear, the antidote to feeling like we might step in something, hurt someone, shame ourselves, elicit feelings of guilt, or cause more pain is compassion. There is an incredible book, it's called 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, that I wish the whole world would read. But if you are interested in looking at this, compassion is more than just seeing through the eyes of someone else. It's seeing through their eyes until their views become legitimate to you. And if we are going to demand compassion from privileged groups, we must demonstrate it. The next question is, how will you sustain yourself when things go sideways. I've shared some of the stories with you. I would say most of my vice presidents have seen me come a little unhinged at some of the things that happened. And that's when what you value and what you believe has to become your North Star. When I was a kid, I was in love with Wonder Woman. She was the only female superhero, talk about diversity and inclusion. And we went to see Wonder Woman this last summer, my mother and my daughter and I. And there's a scene in the movie where Wonder Woman is getting totally wrecked by humanity. And it's just sucking all around. And a demigod comes in and says, hey, Wonder Woman, maybe we should peace out. Like, this is just not working out. They don't really deserve your efforts. And her response was, it's not about what people deserve, it's about what you believe, and I believe in love. And so to arc back to the beginning of my story with a photo of my parents, they believed in love. What is your top value? How will it serve as your North Star? And this leads me to my final question, which is, do you have a community to support and sustain you? To remind you of what that top value is, to hold your heart when it's broken, to make you laugh when you step in it? How many times have I stepped in it? How many diversity emergencies have I created? A lot. And so that group of people, ask them to be part of this journey and ask them to say yes to you. My people are here today. Brett Anderson is here today. He is no longer the Vice President of University Advancement. He works in the President's office, and he's usually in Denver, and he rolled in. He said yes. So say yes to your people that need you the most. Thank you.
You know, as a diversity trainer on campus, I hope people come skipping to my sessions at times, but I understand it, and I love your insight that sometimes the altruistic, it's the right thing to do approach is not enough. But how do we leverage diversity, equity, and justice to promote all students and employees from within? And so I appreciate that. Also, Alexis did note that the folks that volunteered to do the session today, they have no control over their slides once they get off the stage. And for even the most seasoned public speaker, that can be pretty intimidating. And so I do want to recognize that and give major props to our speakers. If this is a challenge that you would love to accept in the future, come and talk to me. Come and talk. It's a great professional development opportunity that we have the ability to offer you here on campus. So our next speaker, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Dafina Lazarus Stewart, DL for short. DL is a professor in the School of Education and the tri-director of the Student Affairs and Higher Education program. Dr. Stewart joined CSU just this fall after 12 years on the faculty at Bowling Green State University. Dr. Stewart's research and teaching center the experience of minoritized groups in higher education with the goal of igniting institutional transformation. Please help me welcome, I'm so excited to have DL here and on campus, Dr. DL Stewart.
Thank you, Raya. We ready? Good afternoon. No? Thanks, some of you hear me. I'm gonna go because these are already starting. All right. So over the past 17 years that I've spent teaching and working in higher education institutions as a full-time faculty member, preparing people to go into or continue to advance in fields in student affairs and higher education more broadly, I've become increasingly convinced that the reason that we have been experiencing this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or perhaps more accurately, 3 steps back, 1 step forward, incremental, inconsistent, halting progress on issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice on our campuses is because we have failed collectively to take seriously the need to systematically address how we might shift our paradigms about how we approach these issues. I entered this conversation as a young Black child born and raised in Harlem in New York City. That's a picture from my senior yearbook, my senior high school yearbook in 1991. Yes, I was able to be raised in a community whose ethos valued and exemplified the knowledge and the brilliance embedded and inherent in Black people, that lifted up Black women and Black femmes as people who were not just mules, as Zora Neale Hurston talked about, but also capable of not just producing knowledge, but carrying forward that wisdom and that growth. I am of Harlem, I am from Harlem, and it was in Harlem that I learned and recognized as I grew up that evil created the inner cities, not the other way around. And so I became convinced of what Frederick Douglass has been quoted as saying, that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so issues of equity and justice in higher education, just like any other societal institution, are often intractable because power concedes nothing without a demand. But that demand cannot be put on the backs of people from marginalized and minoritized groups to be the ones who are fixed in order to better assimilate and fit in to those institutions. But rather, the institutions must undergo radical transformation in order to actually be places where they can lift up, support, and educate everyone who comes through its doors. However, what happens often in this work in equity and justice is that it is treated as an add-on. So that little hand sort of adding on the blocks, so we can add it on and we can take it off and we can move it around and put it in the front and move it in the back, as depends on what's happening in the public eye, whether we want to get ourselves out of trouble or keep ourselves off the front page of the local newspaper. If we want to stay off of a trending topic on Twitter, we tend to then forward our efforts toward equity and justice and mask them really in conversation only about diversity and inclusion, asking very different kinds of questions than what we need to that would actually forward that work. We tend to focus on just compositional diversity. Who's in the room? And how are those folks feeling about the room that they're in? Instead of really looking at the room itself. So when we think about institutional climate models, some early work, it's 20 years old now, Silvia Hurtado and other colleagues of her talked about, particularly as regards racial climate, the need to first think about the institution's history and legacy of inclusion and exclusion, in addition to compositional diversity, in addition to how people are perceiving the campus climate, in addition to how people are interacting with each other on campus. If we first don't recognize that here, in the case of CSU, as a land grant institution, that the land grant project was an unabashed political effort to advance settler colonialism across the western part of this country. That is also part of the land grant history. We need to acknowledge that we sit here on this land on the backs and on the murders of indigenous people in this area. Equity and justice is everyone's work. So it has to be all hands on deck, right? And it has to be also thinking about policy and practices. That was from the other slide that I didn't get to in my allotted 1 minute. That we need to be thinking about not just that legacy, but also how we are shaping our policies and our practices, the ways we do our work as institutions every day. And that requires everyone's involvement. That's not just one office, it's not just one unit, it's not just one piece of the campus, that's everybody has to be on board with that. So it is absolutely an all hands on deck. The questions that we don't ask matter. In that we have to disrupt myths of merit and fairness across institutional policies and practice. So as we think about our classrooms and our pedagogy, who's in the room today? Who are we prepared to teach? Who are we prepared to teach? This is a question that I ask myself as a faculty member every day, now going on 17 years. Who am I prepared to teach? Who do I assume is in my classroom? Who do I assume needs to be made unsafe and needs to be challenged in class? As we think about research metrics, being the institution that we are, what are those metrics and how are we recognizing that those metrics often undermine equity and justice, that they're reliant on factors in data, impact factors, for instance, and indexes and citation rates that are inherently that inherently rely on racism, sexism, patriarchy, and other forms. When we think about our community-institution relations, we need to ask who's at the table when proposals for university expansion are forwarded. What's the history of the institution and its municipal borders? Doing all of this is a total campus mandate. As I said before, it's not the responsibility of any one unit or office on campus. It can't just be heralded by people like Alexis in her office. It has to be something that we all take a role in and are invested in. We need to keep calm because it requires a paradigm shift. Thank you.
That was phenomenal. These presentations are so impactful. I would like to just record that and then just play it to anybody who wants me to come and work with them. Because a precursor, I could just say there, that work is done. Thanks, DL. I do want to note that we are so lucky to have DL on our campus, and we need DL's voice. So thank you. So if you would like to hear more from DL, you can attend our session later in the week. So take a look at the schedule that we have up at the registration table. A lot of our presenters are, and Alexis is also presenting later in the week, a lot of our presenters today will be presenting later on. Okay, we're ready. We're ready to talk about STEM education. Next up, we've got Dee Dee Right. Dee Dee Right. Yeah. Dee Dee Right is currently a second-year PhD student in the graduate degree program in ecology. Her research involves examining beginning 6th through 12th grade STEM teachers through an ecological lens with the school community acting as the environment. You may notice that she's slightly older than your average student, you and me both. It simply means that she brings 25 years of work experience teaching middle and high school and health, along with supporting science teacher professional development in the classroom. When not on campus, Dee Dee is enjoying superhero movies with her partner Lance and son Jared, or else attempting to discipline her crazy dogs that constantly eat off the counter. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dee Dee Right.
Thank you. Okay, checking. Oh, I'm on. All right. So I've been spending the last 25 years working in K-12 education, and that's been involved in STEM education. And so what I want to talk about today is where I'm at, because now I'm shifting to look at STEM through a higher ed perspective. And if you're not familiar with STEM, it's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so what you may be wondering is, why is this such a big deal? Why is it a big deal if my kid goes to a STEM school or not? Why do I hear in the news that there's a STEM workforce shortage? What does all of that mean for me? Well, STEM encompasses many fields. You can see several here. And my guess is you have all been involved in STEM in some way because you have all gone to school at some point in your life. And the reason we have a STEM workforce today is that we need people to be innovative. We have many pathways for people to be innovative, and all of them start with education. And there are lots of different strong pathways for people to be innovative. Well, the problem that kind of keeps me up at night and brought me into the world of CSU is that there are some voices that are missing in STEM. And they're connected back to STEM education, of where it all started for these people. We're going to show a graph here in just a minute. And it shows you that here's these workforce people in the workforce, and people who are in STEM. And you'll notice that there's some discrepancies there. So it's these disparities of that we don't have enough of every voice in the room that keeps me up at night. So, what does this mean to have disparities and to have multiple underrepresented communities within the STEM workforce? Well, for me, it means that we as a nation can never achieve our full potential. It means that we are missing critical viewpoints and critical ideas out in the world. It means that I have more work to do with teachers. Now, I want you to remember I'm kind of giving you a doom and gloom right now so that I can kind of pick you up with the rest of my story. So if you're like, wow, this is really sad, you just wait. I hope that it gets better. So here's how it started all to get better for me. If you remember a month ago, we had this really awesome event, the total eclipse, and I was way excited about it. You can say I still was really excited about it. And about a year ago, when I heard about it, I was still working for Poon School District, and I said, you know what? We have to have every kid have as much experience with this eclipse and be as excited as I am. So I approached Little Shop of Physics and Brian Jones, asked for 30,000 pairs of glasses for all students in PSD, and he said yes. And I was like, this is awesome. All these kids get to have a great experience. And then I thought, why do I so desperately want them to have a great experience? And it was because of experiences I had as a child. When I was in 3rd grade, I got to watch the eclipse. We didn't have glasses back then. We had pinhole viewers. But then I also had people who would let me be, if you don't recognize, this is R2-D2 when Star Wars first came out. So I got to be the robot for Halloween. I got to build volcanoes and mix up all kinds of baking soda and vinegar, which that is so awesome. And then I got to dissect animals and actually touch a heart in my hand. And I thought, these are awesome experiences. Well, what did they all have in common? They all had teachers who were willing to inspire and have set up experiences for kids so that they could achieve their dreams. This was one of my favorite teachers. She was my teacher in 2nd grade and 5th grade. I had her twice. I thought I should have been her child. If she would have taken me home this summer, oh. But you know what? She wasn't the only one. I had multiple teachers who inspired me. And teachers, for us, inspire us to explore and achieve our dreams and say, here's really what I want to do with the rest of my life. Well, here's an issue right now. We have a shortage of teachers. You can see these headlines from this past summer that show here in Colorado, we're missing teachers, particularly math and science teachers. But where are these teachers missing? They're missing in schools in urban and rural areas. The exact populations of students that are missing out in the STEM workforce. See, there's this direct line that when you don't have a qualified teacher that can get you excited about math and science, why do you want to go in to do math and science when you're older? Right? So part of my work here at CSU is to figure out who will inspire our future generations in STEM fields. And so what I get to do is I have the privilege to work with people who want to become teachers. These are all pictures of people who are a part of our Noyce Scholarship program here. They are all brave women who have committed to saying, I will teach in a high needs area. They are all science or mathematics majors that are additionally getting their teaching license and they're all achieving at least a 3.0 or greater. Now, the money we have for them is called the Robert Noyce Scholarship, sponsored by the National Science Foundation. I have the privilege of awarding them $20,000 to help with their education to become a teacher, which is so awesome. Like, giving someone $20,000? Wow. Okay. In turn, they say they will go into schools in our urban and our rural areas, whether it's Colorado or anywhere in the country, and teach for at least 4 years. And our hope is that they will teach longer than 4 years, that they will become long-term teachers just like I was. But we know that just giving them money is not enough. And so what we want to do also is we are adding on some professional development for them. What I'm proposing is that if they learn about some place-based learning, where they can teach kids of what's happening right in their own community, going down to the Poudre River here, then they, as a person, get connected to this community that they're probably not very familiar with. We also know that if they have relationships with mentors of people who have been there, that can help them and strengthen their resilience to remain in the teaching profession. So, because what I've learned is that relationships actually matter. The relationships I had with teachers when I was a kid inspired me to study biology in college, inspired me to go into teaching, and have even inspired me to go back and study even more biology. And so, the goal of the Noyce Scholarship is to embrace these people who want to become teachers and show them how they too can build these relationships, to inspire students so that when we look at our workforce in the future, we have a more diverse STEM workforce. Thank you.
What an amazing program. This is what I love about CSU Inspire, is that we're so large, we don't always get to hear about the great work we're doing just down the street or down the hall. And so this is an opportunity and an engaging way to hear about the really great opportunities that we offer to the students we have at CSU. So thank you so much, Dee Dee. That is a phenomenal program. So next up, we have Robert Franklin II, not to be confused with Robert Franklin I. I have had the opportunity to work with Robert over the last few years with Extension, and I have been consistently impressed by the amount of community engagement that our Extension agents get out and do. I am always impressed with them, and I'm impressed with their work so much that I think we need to bring it back here and support them and recognize what they do out in the community. If you talk about a group that needs to be aware about the changing demographics of the state, it is Extension agents, and I'm happy to partner with them as we continue to build multicultural competency. So today we have Robert Franklin II, who's joined us from Denver in the 4-H program. So Robert is a member of the Colorado State University Extension team in Denver. Robert Franklin works with a team of educators and leaders to create unique experiences in positive youth development with thousands of kids, families, and volunteers. Those experiences include experiential learning activities, leadership and exchange trips, training youth-involved staff and volunteers, and engagement and programming strategies, and much, much more. Robert is the creator of several self-awareness, diversity, and inclusivity-related trainings and campaigns, having worked with hundreds of youth and adults on how their own lives impact those around them. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Robert Franklin.
Okay, are we on? We are? Are we on? We are. Good afternoon. How in the world did a 4-H agent end up on this stage with these people? I'm not really sure. Have you ever heard of 4-H? Hands in the air. Whoa, look at that. So you're probably thinking, right, this guy deals with cows and chickens and county fair. He wore his cowboy boots to this thing, right? Yeah, and it's from Extension. And what you might not know is that it's a youth development organization built on life skills. So since the 1900s, we 4-Hers have been teaching young people how to be the kind of adults that will contribute positively to their world. And the story also says that for probably the first 50, 60, 70 years, the kinds of kids we were dealing with are those of privilege, usually white kids. So a person like me, although I have snazzy boots, was not a part of the game in this youth development world that we call 4-H. One thing that has remained consistent is the life skill wheel. And actually the wheel itself hasn't been around that long, but really the organization is built on teaching young people these life skills. And some of my favorites are there on the side. Accepting differences, concern for others, responsible citizenship, critical thinking, community service, leadership skills, and social skills. So one of my favorite things to do is to take kids out and teach them this experientially, right? We all know about experiential education in here, right? Yes? Okay, all right. I thought it was CSU. You might look at a picture of us during the Denver to Durango exchange, 10 to 12-year-olds, 10 from Denver, 10 from Durango, and go, yeah, that looks like fun. And you might also notice, like what Robert was saying, there's a case for diversity inclusion in there. There aren't that many diverse audiences being represented in that picture. You'd be right. But what aren't you seeing? What don't you see that's happening in here is what I really want to talk about. There's more than meets the eye on these exchange trips. And so here at Mountain to Metro, that's our Mountain to Metro adventure, so same deal. Kids from the mountains, kids from the metro area coming together to go to historical or geological experiences. They meet with people who are important in Colorado history, things of that nature, right? They come together. But still, you look and you're like, well, Robert, those are a bunch of white kids. What's going on there? Thought we were talking about diversity inclusion today. What's up with that? Well, these exchange trips help to serve that purpose, that cause for diversity and inclusion. It's not just where they are, but what they're doing and what we are doing on these trips with these young people. Remember those life skills that I was talking about earlier. Think back when you were 10 or even 15, right? What if you showed up with 19 other people you'd never met, and instead of playing a game like tug of war or dodgeball on the side of a mountain, someone handed you the tug of peace rope, right? Like you just met these people. They don't look anything like you. And you're in a place unfamiliar to you, and now you're talking about peace with people from different backgrounds, with people who look different than you, who don't have your same experience. So you might not see a whole bunch of different colors skin, but you are getting different experiences. What about the first time you rode public transportation? Did you make a connection with somebody who was not a part of your people on purpose? Probably not. No. But these kids ride the RTD downtown Denver or from the south side to the north side on purpose so that they can meet not only the people who are on the buses, not only the people who have that as their only means of transportation, but they meet each other and they have a similar experience. Wow, it really stinks in here. What's going on? Well, I'm feeling it the same way you are, but you're not from a place where you have to ride the bus, and neither am I. Because I'm in Denver, I have access to the Denver mayor. What's really crazy is I took light-skinned, very privileged children to the State of the City address this summer in a predominantly black neighborhood that's experiencing gentrification, and they stood up with that mayor talking about the issues that were going on in that community. They're not from that community, but they care about that community now because of the experience that we had on this particular trip. Because he cares, the mayor happens to care so much about youth in our community, and they're not all from his community, but they were there. They got to experience it. A lot of people were jealous because they got that picture. These 30 kids, they were in a cultural center on the southwest side of Denver, and we went into a neveria just at the end of the day. It was a hot summer day, and so we were going in there. I kid you not, these kids will never, ever, ever ask for ice cream again without remembering the words paleta and por favor. Because they went to an ice cream shop where no one spoke English. They do, but the people they had to ask for something for didn't. They were the minority. Minds blown, right? And so we continued to do that in Little Saigon. I had a speech with this group of kids about you are the minority here. You are the ones who are going to get the side eye. You are the ones who are going to be followed in the store. Not because of how old you are, but because you're an outsider. Kid says, well, none of these people speak English? Well, they might, but they don't have to in this space. What's interesting about these kids is that now they go, wait, so it might be hard, like when I was on the scavenger hunt, it might be hard to get what you need if you don't speak the language in the space. Oh, now when we start talking about immigration and difference and things of that nature, of people who are different than us, we might think differently. These kids might think differently. Shiprock Monument, New Mexico, we were given access, such great access because of these exchange trips to sacred lands. We did not go on to Shiprock Monument, I will tell you, but our youth developers who are Dene in that space took our teenagers and showed them what it's like to be an outsider in your own land. To be able to have to tell people, don't go on that rock even though it's a tourist attraction, because our ancestors believe something very powerful happened there, right? These kids experienced life through the eyes of someone else who gave them access that you can't just get by driving down to the Four Corners. We are interested in ag. And so it's interesting to be learning about how farm to table works when your farm is somebody else's land. But it wasn't when it began. Trying to navigate agriculture and water and food to your family when the government keeps you from being able to do so is the questions, or the part of the questions that these kids are answering. They're learning about. And some of these kids, that's their backyard. Diversity and inclusion happens in these trips because we can have real conversations about real issues with people who are different from us and have that difference on the outside and on the inside. We don't often think of 4-H as a place for diversity and inclusion, and as a matter of fact, nationally, we're trying to change that fact, not just with the black guy standing in front of you, but with the experiences that we give the young people who are with us. This list is real, no matter what the trip is. If they're talking and having courageous conversations about these things, right? Then we are building something that can last a lifetime. Thanks.
That is just one of the many things that we do that make me so proud to be a part of CSU. And I would have to say, if you all haven't had the opportunity to learn more about Extension and the Extension agents we have in the state of Colorado, you definitely should, because it is amazing the work that we're able to do in the different communities throughout the state. So last, but certainly not least, we have Dr. Oyan Poon. Dr. Oyan Poon is an assistant professor of higher education leadership in the School of Education at Colorado State University. Her scholarly interests focus on the racial politics and discourse of college access, higher education organization and policy, affirmative action, and Asian Americans. Drawing from scholarly traditions of critical race theory, sociology of race, and ethnic studies, Dr. Poon has employed a range of methods in her research, including participatory action research, critical discourse analysis, and geospatial analysis. And as a current PhD student in the program, I'm excited to learn about all those different methods because I don't know what they are right now. Her research has recently been recognized with awards from the Association for the Study of Higher Education and ACPA, College Student Educators International. Please help me welcome Dr. Oyan Poon.
10 seconds? Okay, I'm not intimidated at all to be last. Thank you for having me here. So, in 2002, I served as a selective admission reviewer for the first time. I thought I'd, applied to college before I knew exactly how this works. You gotta have good grades, good test scores, and I knew diversity played into it, I just didn't know quite how. I could not have been more naive about the process. Today I conduct research on affirmative action and college admissions, and based on my experiential knowledge and research knowledge, I often find myself screaming this: that's not how it works! That's not how any of this works! Whenever debates around affirmative action come up, especially this last month when the Trump administration argued that they were going to be investigating alleged anti-white and anti-Asian discrimination in affirmative action policies. the public discourse around affirmative action and racial disparities in college access is warped. And it's particularly warped because of 3 specific myths. First myth. The first and perhaps most prevalent myth is that affirmative action is racial quotas, meaning that colleges allegedly set aside certain numbers for various racial minoritized communities. This has not been true since I was 2 years old, standing in my front yard with ribbons in my hair and a frilly dress my mom made for me in 1978. Yes, me. So in that year, the Supreme Court ruled in the Bakke decision that racial quotas were unconstitutional. They said the UC Davis Medical School, which had set aside 4 spots for African Americans, 4 for Latinos, 4 for Indigenous, and yes, 4 for Asian Americans, was illegal. However, they also said racial diversity was important because we're talking about colleges and universities and teaching and learning environments. Bakke could have sued around age discrimination, but he chose to fight a racial equity policy. A second prevalent myth is that affirmative action means that underrepresented racial groups get a racial preference or bonus points in admission review process. To demonstrate this myth, conservative student groups across the country have put on these affirmative action bake sales, suggesting that people of color, and particularly women of color, need to work less hard and have it good and easy when it comes time to get into selective colleges. However, in 2003, when this year's first-year traditionally aged college students were 4 years old, the Supreme Court in the Gratz case said bonus points were illegal and unconstitutional. So that's been barred for a very long time. Jennifer Gratz, also a white woman claiming anti-white discrimination, could have attacked the geographic preference for folks from the Upper Peninsula, which is a largely and overwhelmingly white community and region of the state, but she went after, again, a policy addressing racial diversity and equity. A third myth is that affirmative action lets in unqualified students of color. Underlying this myth is that only students of color can be ill-prepared for college. When we're talking about selective admission institutions, we're talking about schools like this with way more applications than there are room for. And these applicants are highly qualified, I mean extremely qualified and talented, and they are of all races. Some of these schools only let in 5% or less. That means 95% are going to be rejected of all races. The racially unjust reality is that by the time students decide to apply to schools like this, many of their brilliant peers of color who attended under-resourced and segregated high schools have already been systemically dismissed from competition at this level. So when you have students of color submitting applications to these schools, you best believe they're brilliant. So where are we today? Fisher 2. Last summer, the Supreme Court ruled that, again, they reaffirmed again that diversity is very much important, intrinsically holds value in allowing colleges and universities to meet their educational missions. But admissions processes cannot use racial quotas or point systems. In Fisher 2 last summer, the Supreme Court said that colleges can holistically consider race as a, quote, factor of a factor of a factor, unquote, in order to meet their educational missions, because we're talking about education, right? In calling for colleges and universities to start with their institutional missions, the court recognized that selective admissions is about fit between the unique institution and the highly qualified, successful applicant. At some private schools, they consider over 900 factors to determine whether or not a student is fit for their college campus. So, speaking of that educational mission, an important part of that is advancing educational benefits that are difficult, unfortunately, to produce without racial diversity. In Fisher 2, again last summer, Justice Kennedy wrote that diversity, quote, promotes cross-racial understanding, helps to break down racial stereotypes, and enables students to better understand persons of different races, promotes learning outcomes, and better prepares students for an increasingly diverse workforce and society, end quote. All of this is backed up by decades of research in social science and serves as the purpose for race-conscious holistic admissions. The Supreme Court has understood since 1978 that learning environments should be created by colleges based on science of learning and teaching, and according to their mission statements. Indeed, racial diversity serves to benefit students of all races across these aspects. But what exactly does it mean to consider race as a, quote, factor of a factor of a factor, end quote? I once read an essay by a foster youth applicant who had participated in an Upward Bound program and worked more than 25 hours a week at a fast food restaurant. She took all 4 AP classes in her high school. That means, yes, it was an under-resourced high school. Maintained a 4.1 GPA, and wrote about how her circumstances would enable her to best attain her goals to become a leading social worker in the field in her future. She also wrote about how her racial identity allowed her to lead a racial reconciliation project at her high school. Pretty amazing. Race is embedded in this student's story in characteristics of leadership, persistence, help-seeking behaviors, goal orientation, high academic achievement within a specific context, and despite significant adversities. Race here is a factor of a factor of a factor. Interestingly, in a post-Fisher II environment, the student writing this essay, their racial identity doesn't really matter. This brings me to this troubling point. The US has not had a policy to address racial inequalities in college access since 1978. Some of you may have seen this recent New York Times graphic and analysis of selective college enrollment between 1980 and 2015. While the headline isn't wrong, it's a bit misleading in suggesting that even with affirmative action, a policy the public generally presumes to advance racial equality through myths of quotas and bonus points, that Black and Latino students just can't make it. I suggest we look at it for what it actually is. The data starts with 1980, 2 years after the Bakke case, when affirmative action was repurposed away from racial equity goals. A more accurate headline would be, Trends in College Racial Demographics, Unsurprising, given the lack of a national policy for racial equity in college access. All right, I'm gonna go over my time a little bit. Bringing it home. Because I think this ties up what everyone has shared already. Bringing it home, I wonder, can CSU advance comprehensive racial equity policy and practices from K-12 and community partnerships to recruitment and admissions, and through graduation, intentionally living out the principles of community in everything we do as a land-grant university meant to serve the whole state? Thank you.
So obviously that is a much larger topic than we can fully cover in 8 minutes, right? Obviously it's a huge topic and it's a very timely, important topic. I would like to encourage you, Oyan is going to have a session later in the week. Feel free to attend the session and dive deeper into affirmative action and the myths around affirmative action. I was just talking to Leslie Taylor, interim VP for Enrollment and Access, and I think this would be a great opportunity to have some of our admissions folks kind of engage in this conversation. So thank you so much. I'm sad, we've come to the end. We've made it through and we have come to the end, and we've learned so much more about CSU through the process. Yeah. I love your enthusiastic, unprompted claps. Thank you, I appreciate it. So I want to thank our presenters for not only accepting the 8-minute challenge, but for their personal reflections on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I hope you are leaving, as I am today, inspired, looking forward to moving into more diversity and inclusion initiatives and dialogues on our campus. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Our presenters have agreed to stick around for a few minutes. So if you have any questions that you would like to come and to engage our presenters with, please come up and chat with them. We do have evaluations on the table and some pens. Feel free to keep the pens. Please complete the evaluations, leave them on the table, and we will go around and collect them. And on behalf of the Office of the Vice President for Diversity, I would like to thank you for attending, and we're excited to see you at other events throughout the week. Thank you.